Last night and early this morning, a few hundred protesters gathered in the streets of downtown Louisville. They wanted to express their frustration and their pain that so many people in our community are feeling about the tragic death of Breonna Taylor. For several hours, the protests were peaceful, and I thank the majority of people who demonstrated that they understand that peaceful protest is the right path to creating the change that we all seek. Colonel Chavos will go into the details, but we know that after several hours of peaceful protest, some members of the crowd turned violent. We know that 5 of the shooting victims are in good condition. The additional 2 were sent to surgery. Moments ago, the hospital has told us that they are all stable and recovering. My prayers are with all of them, and I'm thankful for that news. These shots came from within the crowd, not from police officers. No officers fired their weapons. If you hear anything to the contrary, that is not factual. The officers, rather at great risk to themselves, immediately went to provide aid to those who were injured, and I thank them for that. To the people who gathered downtown last night to protest, and to many more throughout our city and throughout our country, who feel angry, hurt, afraid, frustrated, tired, and sick of story after story of black lives ending at the hands of law enforcement, I hear you. I've frequently spoken about that historical injustice. But we must find a way to stop this cycle of injustice. But the violence and demonstration and the destruction that we saw last night will not get us there. It will create more tragedies rather than prevent them. And we have to work together as a community to prevent further tragedies. That's why I asked the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, and the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, to investigate what happened on the night of March 13th, why it happened, and what needs to happen now so that justice can be served and so that we can learn how to avoid the circumstances around the tragic death of Breonna. That's what you want. That's what I want. And that's why we've already made numerous changes at LMPD to provide more scrutiny, transparency, and accountability. Amongst them, a new police chief will be named. A new level of oversight has been added to the LMPD. Our body camera policy has been changed to require their use for all officers executing search warrants. We're also establishing a new civilian review board for police disciplinary matters. I'll be meeting with that working group that's putting the civilian process together at 11 o'clock this morning, just a few minutes. And I will be asking them to recommend a board with subpoena power. While we recently changed our policy for no-knock warrants, the use of no-knock warrants will be suspended until further notice. These changes, and more to come, we're not done, should signal that I hear the community, and we will continue to make improvements anywhere that we can. Breonna Taylor's name and her story will now be part of our city's history. But as Breonna's family shared last night, answering violence with violence only makes things worse. I want to really thank them for helping us to work to restore peace. You can imagine the pain that they are having as a family right now, and yet they are still concerned about the safety of our community. I thank the family. They're right. The fight for justice cannot be won with guns and vandalism. It can only be won with persistence and commitment to the shared goal of creating a city of peace, safety, equality, and justice for everyone. Other cities across America experienced protests last night, making it clear once again that we as a community and a country have much work to do to advance our goal of a society where all people have the opportunity to reach their full potential and to live safely. In Louisville, we have been committed to this work for years. And while the events of recent weeks have shown that we still have much to do, and we've always known that, we are committed to this work, whatever it takes and for as long as it takes. And I ask everyone in our community, everyone in every neighborhood, every age, every color, to join us. I know that while some of us have been up most all night, many of our citizens, I'm sure, are waking up to the painful news of what happened last night. Let's use this sad occasion as a wake-up call for our entire community to come together like we never had before. This is a challenge for the entire community, not just Black Louisville, white Louisville, brown Louisville, Black America, white America, brown America. This is the challenge of our time that we must rise to. So let's rise to the challenge of this moment and work for the truth, work for peace, work for justice. For Breonna Taylor, her family, and for all of the people of our city, they deserve it, we deserve it. I'd now like to introduce Colonel Chavos, who will be giving more details on this case, and then I will return to read a statement from Breonna Taylor's family. Colonel?
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon. First, I want to say we at LMPD certainly understand anger, the frustration we saw from many last night during the protest downtown. We know there is much work to be done to build and restore trust in this community. Our goal was to allow for a peaceful display of that anger, of that frustration, which we were able to do and to allow during the first several hours of the event. However, once we started seeing significant property damage to cars and buildings downtown, small fires started in garbage cans, we had to move in to take more action and try to disperse crowds. It wasn't until after shots were fired in the crowd that officers fired tear gas. And then it was only to enable officers to reach victims and provide medical aid. Even with bottles and other objects being thrown at them, their concern was for those people who were hurt. Overall, 7 people were shot last night by other members of the crowd. No officers fired their weapons. Multiple shots were fired throughout the duration of the event. We're very fortunate there were not additional victims. Only one of those shot is in critical condition at this time. We are still collecting information on all the damage, but we know there were many windows broken in downtown buildings, bricks were thrown into buildings, shots were fired into buildings, including the courthouse and LMPD headquarters. Graffiti was painted in several places, including the firefighter memorial. Additionally, several government and personal vehicles were damaged during the event. 2 officers were taken to the hospital with medical conditions spurred by the event. LMPD made 1 arrest of an Owensboro resident for disorderly conduct and failure to disperse. Moving forward, we understand there are several additional protests planned for over the weekend. All off days for officers have been canceled as we ready to staff any additional situations that arise. Again, our goal will be to allow for the peaceful expression of protest. We value the right to free speech and understand this community has a lot to say right now. We hear you. We will not tolerate violence that leads to people being hurt. We will not tolerate destruction of our beautiful city. We are prepared to take whatever action we must to try to ensure no one else is injured during this time of unrest. We ask the community to please voice your opinions in a peaceful way. Thank you.
I'd like to close with a statement from the family of Breonna Taylor. Breonna devoted her own life to saving other lives, to helping others, to making people smile, and to bring people together. The last thing that she'd want to see right now is any more violence. Changes are being made, but it's not enough. We will not stop until there is truth, justice, and accountability. Breonna's legacy will not be forgotten, and it's because of all of us saying her name and demanding justice. We are saying her name more each day. Thank you. Please keep saying her name. Please keep demanding justice and accountability, but let's do it the right way, without hurting each other. We can and we will make some real change here. Now is the time. Let's make it happen, but safely. #BreeWay. Again, I want to thank the family for recognizing the importance of peaceful protests and the ability of that to make change. I'd like to call on everybody in the community to work together to make sure that we get to that change as expeditiously as possible and do so in a peaceful way. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions if they come in from the media. We're not seeing any right now. Question is, were the 7 shooting victims injured in the same shooting episode? Colonel?
Yes, the answer to that question is that all 7 victims were injured in the same shooting incident. We had 2 officers that were taken to the hospital with chest pains. One officer was kept overnight, and the other officer, I believe, was released.
Another questions on there is, can we estimate the cost of damage? Not at this point. The damage was mainly broken windows, some cars on the streets, some statuary, but it's all unfortunate, but it's not a huge amount of money, I'm sure. But it's the emphasis here is let's protest peacefully. Let's see. Are there any leads on the shooters? 7 people is not injured, is not an insignificant number.
One person is too many, so of course that is significant. There are no leads on the shooter, but our homicide unit is still investigating, and so we hope to have some leads after the investigation is complete.
Colonel, do you know how many officers were on the scene of the protest?
We do not like to disclose that information on how many officers were on the scene, but there were several officers.
How does LMPD plan to do things differently tonight in regards to the presence of law enforcement? Any plans to bring in National Guard or other municipalities to help?
There are no plans at this time to bring in National Guard. We are considering the possibility of bringing other agencies outside of Louisville to help us. We will be discussing our plans later on today, so we will have a plan in place to deal with any problems that occur.
All right, I'd like to thank everybody for their questions. We will have another media availability later this afternoon. Again, I just want to emphasize that we understand, and I feel as best as I can, the pain and frustration of our community. We have taken significant action since this incident. We'll continue to take more action as we can out of this tragedy. And I just ask people to recognize that we understand this is one incident in a book of unequal power dynamic between law enforcement and African Americans in America for 400 years. And as this is playing out in our city, I think our opportunity is to show the rest of the country how we can get this right, how we can work together to make change, to make positive change, and do so in a peaceful manner. Ultimately, that is the only way forward. We're all going to be here when this is all said and done. So I encourage the community to join us in that dialogue, join us in that action, and peacefully protest. Thank you, and we'll be back this afternoon.